And since unfortunately we didn't have the opportunity to listen to Chris Küte, we're more or less at the end of the SDRA of this year. And I would like to open a discussion for the last couple of minutes where we would like to go next year, or what kind of suggestions you have to us, what we can improve. I really ask you to be open, and I'm very happy about constructive criticism, and I'm more than willing to implement that in our plannings for next year. Any ideas, suggestions? Were the topics right? Was the depth of the topics adequate? Or were we too technical? Were we too much on the surface? Was the selection of the topics according to what you expected? What do you think?
I think it would be good to have some topics on the take side, okay, of the use of the SDR, because there are a lot of opportunity, okay. One of them, this poor signal techniques. It would be nice to have more technical details about that. And there are other areas, for example, using switched mode amplifiers, even with not constant amplitude signals. Okay, there are 2 or 3 different techniques for that, and would be nice to have some presentation about it. Because I think in the past few years, SDR is much more concentrated on the receiver side. And there are a lot of opportunity on the transmitter side.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, on the transmit side, there's also a lot of other interesting challenges like digital pre-distortion. I saw it here on the floor implemented in one SDR, but I haven't seen it in others yet. And I think this digital pre-distortion is also important technology in mobile phone headsets to actually drive amplifier closer to the compression point. So I think that's also important.
Okay, yeah, this is also for sure a very interesting topic. We had a talk on this topic last year. Pre-distortion, but generally I do agree that I think there is much more to it, and maybe we could see some more real examples or implementations. That's certainly true. Any more ideas, suggestions?
For me, it would be interesting to see how to build your own GNU radio blocks. A tutorial, maybe 20 minutes or so. Not with the basics, but how to build your own block. And maybe a Python block and a C++ block. That you do an example or 2 examples how to start from 0, that you get a block that you can implement in GNU radio. That would be good, at least for me.
Yeah, that's definitely that. Actually, like the GNU Radio community is kind of a bit short on the entry-level documentation side. That's obvious. Yeah, it's not like we are bad documented. That's something that we always hear, and I think even MATLAB hears that they are badly documented and they have like 10,000 pages of documentation. But that's all like, okay, this specific block does this and this algorithm if you read source code. It's not the documentation that someone needs that enters the area. So this is something that 2 years ago we tried to tackle with the GNU Radio tutorials, which are now available on tutorials.gnuradio.org, because the old URL was like this long, and that's the most common URL that I typed into emails was that URL. So the need for that is actually pretty clear. I'm always thinking about how to actually make something like a workshop that does exactly what you're asking for. possible, because writing your own blog without having some vision of something that you'll need is always a bit hard. Like, I can tell you how to write a multiply two signals blog, but kind of boring because that already exists, right? But yeah, I think that's something that if we can't do it here, we might need to do it on YouTube or something. So yeah, thanks for the input. I actually see that doing this on a level that people can actually follow along rather than having some documentation is really important.
But there was one observation for this year. When we sent out the call for papers, it didn't take very long. We just waited for about 2 weeks and we had all the suggestions in our inbox. So just 2 weeks and the entire SDRA was more or less completely organized. That was really a surprise because last year we waited, I think, for 6 weeks or so. And so we see a tendency that we get submissions very, very quickly, very easily. And this brought me to the idea that it might make sense to open a second track. But of course, opening a second track involves a lot of organization work, and we need a different room. And the question is, what happens if we partition our audience? Because, well, this morning we had around 100 people listening to the talks. In the afternoon we had a little less. We're in the average of about, let's say, 40, 50. So the question is, what happens to the audience? And of course, we don't want to split the audience into small groups that don't talk to each other. But instead, we prefer a big audience and well, to bring people together. This is the main target of the SDRA. And well, of course, I was thinking about, well, maybe having some kind of workshop character also. We decided against it up to now. But of course, generally it makes sense to place such a plan here under this roof. I mean, in general, SDRA is kind of a brand mark. It's a brand for everything that goes into SDR and the field of amateur radio. And we can extend it. And it is my idea really to extend it and to broaden this roof and try to get more approaches and more ideas under this roof and strengthen the community. The question is there, how broad will it get and how many people do we attract? Because the broader it is, the more diverse the audience will be. So you have the beginners and of course you have the specialists. And who do you address first? So if you go into detail, you lose the beginners. If you just stay on the surface, you lose the specialists. So that's kind of a trade-off. And you need to catch different groups. And of course, as you've seen, the topics are still there. We also have a very strong practical part. It's very much about real transceivers, really using machinery out in the field and producing signals. That's also an aspect. There's a lot of people who want to have up-to-date, brand new technology, but also really use them for, well, doing radio communication. And this is also a group of, well, an interest group within this field which we must address. So the question is really, where are we going? And I'm very happy for your input here.
Maybe we can put more effort in visualization of radio signals. For example, I saw here this very nice tool with InSpectrum. That was very nicely done, and that really gives people insight. Oh, this is how a digital radio signal looks like. Yeah, if there are more tools available for that and become more popular and integrated in tools like Dune Radio, then it's maybe also easier for new people to understand how it works.
Okay.
Only one organizational point. On Friday there are not so many technical courses or workshops. There are more groups who are meeting in YL and I don't know how many groups, but the technical discussions are on Saturday and sometimes 3 at the same time, which are interesting. So some part on Friday, at a time where there are more meetings from groups and no technical stuff is there, would be good. And the rest on Saturday, but not always in parallel to other interesting technical stuff. That would be good when it's possible.
Okay, thank you. This is a really good...
The HP SDR forum is in parallel at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
So some people started in the beginning and listened to the trainings and to the workshop here, and then they had to left to the other room. And when this is not in parallel, when it's Friday, Saturday, or I don't know how to split it up, but not at the same time.
Okay, so we could probably put kind of a workshop on Friday. Could be a good idea. Okay. Okay. Well, we also thought about, well, if we increase this roof and put more speeches under this roof and more topics and more presentation, whatever, workshops, we could also try to collect more papers. Last year we had 2 papers, and that put us in kind of a difficult situation because 2 papers is great. We really had 2 papers that could be published. One from Andras and the other one from Stefan. Where is he? Over there, yeah. But with 2 papers, you kind of have a problem because 2 papers is not enough for an independent publication. And for that reason, we decided to put those 2 papers in the proceedings of the Munich amateur radio conference. There's a conference proceeding book, which is really a big book, and we decided to just publish them there so that we have kind of a publication. I would really like to have an independent publication format like proceedings of the SDRA. If we get more papers, not just presentations. Presentations are good, but real papers, kind of scientific papers, research, ideas, whatever, what you usually have on scientific conferences. Results of your experiments of any type, positive, negative, whatever, something you've tried out and you found out something interesting. People, topics, things, results that are of interest for other members of this community. We could collect those papers and publish them in this kind of format with our own publication. Well, that's an idea. If we get enough material, we'll do it. What do you think of this? Do you think this is feasible?
Yes, that's feasible. But I suggest don't underestimate the effort. So I did it myself in the past, organizing workshops or conferences and with papers to be published in journals. And then there's a question if there's a review process involved and etc. But of course it's a credit to the authors if they see the material published in a journal, to which they may then like to refer in the future as a reference. An idea for your academy, if you want to expand it, I would suggest to you to define tracks or topics. I don't know your last call for contributions, but that helps. And also to structure maybe a bit the flow of the presentations. For instance, the receive side, the transmit side. Also, I would more distinguish between hardware, which is really useful for the homebrew, and the more advanced stuff, which are similar to these development platforms, which are in the first place generic, but are used for this particular SDR application. It's a brilliant platform in a university environment for educational purposes, etc. But at home, I have my doubts if I, as an amateur, would like to go into the nitty-gritty details of a very local or a VHDL subject. That's up to and of course the individuals, what they would like to do at home. But that's a steep curve for a beginner. If we throw at him, well, you have now to learn VHDL and all these fancy development environments to get ready for SDR. I think that would give a very wrong perception if you would convey that message. So there are the small things which can be very much entertaining and get an idea about what is SDR. And I think it can be done for prices also much less than the red pitaya we have seen this morning. I have 2 or 3 red pitayas, and they have their price. That's clear. And one has to implement or has to go through all sorts of problems and mistakes, I myself, when implementing the stuff and getting it running in the end. Even a small kick filter, it takes its time and a lot of scratching. Why does it not work that way I want it? That's, I think, is an important part of it. And if we give a wrong impression there, then it's bound to end in frustration, and I think that should be avoided. So for your next year, I would suggest, yes, please expand. That's a good idea. And please define what papers you would expect in your call. And I would maybe as a first distinguishing hardware, platforms, measurement, testing, another track, and those fancy things as we have seen just before, demonstrating what is feasible. But maybe it's not really the first step.
Thank you. Interesting ideas.
Yes, so I can fully understand the aspect of not putting beginners in front of the question whether they're designing their own FPGA-based direct sampling receiver or something else. But on the other hand, that's exactly what we're aiming for. If we really draw a line and say this is an advanced system, this is a beginner system, is that we separate the audience into 2 parts, which I think is actually a bit dangerous, because we end up like having an SDR track for beginner radios which differ functionally from traditional radios in no way, because they have a knob that changes frequency and maybe 2 other knobs that change modulation. So I'd be rather careful not to actually draw the line somewhere saying this is advanced stuff. I've seen people spend money on amateur radio equipment that would put some smaller cars into shame, and I think it's really hard to tell where something basic ends and something very advanced begins. So what I can see is that there's a very interesting line to draw between this is a basic concept and this is something you might be interested in if you already haven't been in touch with software-defined radio. That's something that I can see, and you can actually like make the transition from one to the other rather easy by having them in sequence or in parallel, so that you're not missing the basic advanced talk by listening to the advanced basic talk. That's something that I can imagine that would make more sense. Also, I kind of think that the track where all the advanced equipment vendors present their SDRs will kind of end up as a trade fair, to be honest. Like, then there's this company A, company B, company C presenting their devices, and yeah.
Yeah, well, this is also an aspect. Well, first of all, as long as we're here still together, some people are already leaving, I would like to say thank you to one person who is not here, and this is Professor Rode from Rode & Schwarz, the owner of the company, who gave us 1,500 euros so we could borrow this camera and have the cutting done by a professional company. Yeah, I'd also like to say thank you for, well, Mika Kjellman, is he here? No? Maybe he was here. Mika Kjellman. Mika did the cutting for the videos last year. We had considerable problems with the camera because there was an audio distortion on one track, and I was failing. I was really failing doing all the video processing, video cutting. It simply didn't work somehow. And then I asked on the mailing list. Well, I think somebody asked, "Where are the videos?" Was it you?
No, can't be.
Or somebody, I don't know. Well, someone who was here and who was on the mailing list anyway. But that somehow put me under pressure, and I said, okay, well, I see that I can't do it. I'm failing. And so I was asking back on the list, is there anybody who knows how to edit videos and who knows how to try and get the best out of a broken video? And Mika Kjellman from Berlin volunteered, and it was really much work because video editing is a lengthy issue. And what he did, he copied the working audio track onto the broken audio track, resampled everything, cut the individual videos out, and then he provided the MP4s to me. And I still had kind of problems uploading those videos to YouTube because YouTube sometimes didn't accept the format, so I had to reformat and whatever. So. Yeah, well, and then we decided, okay, this is really a lengthy issue, and it's kind of risky, and this time we tried to get a professional camera, and this time we really have a very good camera, and we'll have the cutting done by a company, so that we don't need to rely on volunteers, which is good if we have volunteers, but volunteers are still volunteers, and so. Going back to this kind of commercial aspect, yes, there is a commercial aspect. And the question is, how far can we go? So the next question is, I've been talking to Neil Pandya about a sponsoring from EDOS, and he said, well, yeah, we can think about that. And the question is, well, if we start asking companies for sponsoring, if we start with one company, we can also start to ask other companies, and we can start to raise money. And if we raise money, we can think about other things like talking to the DL8RDS that we want to have a bigger room, or that we want to have 2 rooms. And so this is all a discussion that comes if you have a certain budget in your hand. And well, these are steps also in the organizational development of this brand and everything that comes after it. And yeah, Michael is also here, and he's been here all the day, and you know him? No? Michael Niemetz, he's a member in our program committee, and he's a good friend of mine from Regensburg. And the other Michael was also here, also sitting in one of those back rows. Michael Mechtel, he's a former colleague of mine, and he's not, well, both are professors, and Michael Niemetz is professor at Regensburg University of Applied Sciences, and the other Michael is also a professor at the University of Applied Sciences of Konstanz, and of course we have our third Michael, who was doing presentation and guidance work here today. I would like to thank them for input, for ideas, for contributions, for help and telephone calls and whatever. This is also worth saying thank you. So, I've been saying thank you to our most important contributors. I'm saying thank you to the speakers, to those who have contributed to this SDRA. Great talks, deep insights, highly valuable knowledge from the practical domain, from the theoretical domain, from operating aspects, from all sorts of perspectives on the topic. Well, the SDRA, there's a German proverb which says, einmal ist keinmal, zweimal ist dreimal. Once means not at all, and 2 times means more or less same than like 3 times. We've had the SDRA the 2nd time now, which means it's more or less almost the 3rd time. There will be another SDRA next year, for sure. And I'm looking forward to set up the next SDRA. It will also be here, somewhere here. We will consider all your inputs. We will write it down in our organization plan very carefully in the lessons learned section, and we'll consider that for the planning for next year. We have also learned that we must start to plan even earlier. We started to put out the call for papers in March, but I think we must start even back in December. So please don't be surprised when you see a call for papers for the SDRA 2017 already in December, while the SDRA is going to take place in July. Next year, the SDRA, please note the date, the SDRA is going to be a little later. It's going to be in July, not in June. So, these are my famous last words. Thanks for coming, and I hope to see you again next year. Thank you very much.